Hello and welcome to the WFL video rulebook. This is section 2 on our league settings and scheduling. You can find links to section 1 and other sections of the rulebook down in the video description below. I am Winuvas, one of the leadership team here in the WFL, and I want to welcome you to league settings and scheduling. It's not an exciting part of our rulebook, but it's something we like to go over to make sure you understand all the things we do to ensure that WFL games run smoothly and run time efficiently. And this is, again, one of the important sections. It's not a big section, but it is an important section because it also goes over scheduling as well. So I'll pop it up here. And again, like I mentioned in all the sections of the rule book, here is a picture of our logo, but the main thing I want to focus on is the motto of the league there below. It's not about the W or the L, it's about the WFL. We're a big believer in sportsmanship, community over, guys' individual win-loss records. Yes, we celebrate guys who do well in our league like any league does, but it's not the end-all be-all. Essentially, you could be 0-17, and as long as you can provide content and community to this area, you're a valued member here no matter what your win-loss record is. And if you don't value folks that have a good win-loss record, then you won't last long here in the WFL. So with that being said, we'll move on to our settings. We play in simulation game style. Obviously, there's arcade, simulation, and competitive. We play on that simulation game mode to make ratings matter. We play on all-pro difficulty with sliders. We do adjust for difficulty, and the reason we do that is because all Madden can be a little bit unrealistic in how it presents itself. I realize that, especially with some of us being a little bit better on the sticks than others, all-pro can be a little bit less challenging, but overall, it's more manageable for a majority of our members that aren't terribly skilled on the sticks to be at that all-pro difficulty. It keeps games competitive. We do play with X Factor and Superstar abilities off, and the easy explanation for that from our standpoint is we do that to make sure that games are balanced, especially with X Factors. X Factors are very arcadey and not simulation. I understand they're trying to mimic great players, but the problem is that they do a poor job of doing it, in our opinion. And superstar abilities there are some that are quite overpowered. So we basically just turn them all off so that way the abilities of the players matter. We play 10-minute quarters with an accelerated clock down to 20 seconds. That generally produces games on average at about an hour of length, with maybe going into an hour 10, hour 20, depending on how much scoring is done and how much non-defense is happening. We generally like that number right there. We did try 9 minutes with our setup, but it seems like there's not quite enough time in the game. So we do 10-minute quarters, accelerated clock to 20 seconds, and created coaches only. When you come into the league, you have to create a new coach. And the reason for that, we did not do that last cycle with Madden 23 because of issues with the franchise mode, which was, if you're not familiar with it, what rock were you living under? But with Madden 24, hopefully fixing a good bit of those glitches, we are going to go back to just created coaches only. And the main reason for that is current coaches have certain attributes already assigned to them that can make certain coaches overpowered right out of the gate. And to keep us all on the same even footing as far as a head coach is concerned, we're going to let you have to create a coach when you come into the league. We are a no-switch league, and lots of leagues have certain forms of no-switch. I know there are some leagues that do full no-switch. We are not a full no-switch league. Our switching rules are when a pass is in the air, no player is allowed to switch, whether you're on offense or whether you're on defense. Once the process of the pass is finished, whether it's an interception, a completed pass, or an incomplete pass, then switching is allowed. This includes using buttons to manipulate your catch mechanics, such as aggressive catch, run after the catch, possession catch. All of those are illegal in WFL. You cannot use those buttons to manipulate. If the player has that attribute and they make that decision themselves without user input, that's one thing. But we do not allow you on offense to manipulate that in any way, shape, or form, nor do we allow you to switch on defense. Now, on run plays, we allow switching. So if it's a run play and you need to switch to an edge defender that's got a better position or a better angle, you are free to do so. There is no rules restricting that at all. The only rules restricting switching are when the pass is in the air, and if you are playing a safety or a corner, you're using that corner or safety, and you're in position to make a play, you can go make a play. You just can't switch to a safety or cornerback in the area to make a play. That's the big distinction there. So if you are using your cornerback or using your safety, because I do know some players that do, especially safety, that use your safety. If you're in a position to go make a play, go make a play, okay? We're not stopping you from doing that. What we are stopping you from doing is switching to manipulate a play because of your additional reaction time. If you're already involved in the play, make a play. If you're not involved in the play, you'll have to depend on the CPU's attributes of that particular position and that particular player to come through for you in the clutch, okay? Scheduling, we run on a 72-hour advanced schedule. Now that can go faster. I will be honest and tell you 72 hours is about as fast as I can tolerate. I know some leagues go 24 hours or 48 hours. I honestly, with my lifespan the way I am right now, 48 hours is too fast for me. If we advance early, that's one thing, and because we'll usually make it up on the back end. But 72 hours is our advanced schedule in the WFL, with 36 hours from advance, mandatory scheduling via Discord. What we do is we use Neon Sports to generate threads for every week's worth of games, and it auto-populates you if you're assigned to whatever team you're assigned to in Neon Sports. It will auto-populate you into that thread, so that way you have immediate communication with your opponent. Now, one thing I want to iterate as part of this video, and I'm going to come back on camera here in just a second to kind of be on camera for this. One thing I want to iterate here with scheduling, and this is something that I think is just part of how we communicate in internet society these days. We do not want you to just simply pop on and say, hey, when can you play? That's not acceptable communication. What is acceptable communication is providing at least a general guideline of times that you are available to play during the 72-hour window in which your game falls. So, for example, something that would be appropriate would be saying, hey, on Monday, I'm unavailable. On Tuesday, I'm available from 5 to 9 p.m. Central Time. And then on Tuesday, I'm available all day. That's acceptable scheduling. You give a general window of when you know you can play, and then your opponent can work around that, okay? When can you play is not acceptable scheduling. Giving time frames, we're all adults, even if you are younger, like in your 20s. I know we have some folks that float around here that are in their early to mid 20s. We have some guys that are in our 50s. We have one guy I know that's 60 and he plays in this league. We're all adults. We all have lives and other obligations and other commitments that we have, whether you're a family person, whether you have, other types of obligations and responsibilities that you deal with. We all have things we deal with. And so we can't just say, hey, when can you play? We have to have a schedule to work around. Like for me, for example, I have to work around the wife's schedule because she hates Madden. And so I have to play around that and try and work it in when I can and get some dirty looks when I have to play when she's home. But that's the window I play in. That's the responsibilities I deal with. So you saying when can you play, that doesn't help me at all. So getting out there in the thread and saying specific, doesn't have to be a specific time, but just at least a grouping of hours that you can play. And if it's all day, say all day. That's fine. But when can you play is not acceptable. You got to give some times, even if it is, I can play all day. Because when can you play is unacceptable. That's one thing I want to get out of the WFL is when can you play. I can play these times. Tell me your times. That's what we want with scheduling. We do want dialogue. We want communication. When can you play is not acceptable communication. All right, my rant's over. Now I'm gonna go back to the video. Go back to this side. 36-hour mandatory scheduling via Discord. Within 36 hours of advance, you have to post in that thread that's created for you some type of time you can play. and then hopefully your opponent gets back with you. Within 36 hours, if your opponent doesn't get back with you, the WFL scheduler can make decisions on whether or not you get a forced win, whether or not you get an autopilot CPU game. But the WFL scheduler makes those calls. Right now, that's mainly headed by our Raiders and Dolphins owners. I do participate in the scheduling side. I participate in just about everything. But I don't usually make those final calls. It's usually up to either our Raiders owners, our primary guy, but also our Dolphins owner and our Vikings owner right now. That'd be Lamigra, Ross, and Polio. They all kind of handle scheduling on some form or facet. But they usually make those final calls. So if you don't want to be kind of singled out as somebody who doesn't schedule or somebody who misses games, make sure you're communicating constantly. We ask you to check into Discord pretty much daily, and Discord is available on your phone. It's available as a web browser app without downloading the app. You can download the app on your laptop and use it on your laptop as well. That's what I do. So there's multiple ways you can communicate. There's really no excuse for you to, unless you're other obligations come up, of emergency or something. There's no real excuse for you to be completely AWOL for days at a time, or even more than one day at a time. So failure to schedule within 36 hours of advance by either team. So if nobody bothers to post in their thread, it is an automatic sim. We don't care if one of you posts an hour, 36 hours and 1 minute. If you pass the deadline, we call it a sim, and you just deal with the consequences of that. We don't allow any playing after 36 hours. If you didn't communicate, tough. You just deal with a sim. Okay? And like I said, the scheduler makes the decision, the final call on any sort of issues that can come up. They determine whether or not one team has communicated more than the other. They determine whether or not a team has communicated at all. Any decisions that are made by the WFL schedule are final. And one last thing to go over. If you make and set a time and you no-show, the WFL scheduler can also say it's a forced win for your opponent. Okay, so if you are having any sort of issues making a time frame that you have agreed upon, be sure to communicate that as soon as you possibly can to avoid a forced loss. If you don't communicate, we have no choice but to make a decision that you've no-showed, and therefore we can award that game to the opponent if the WFL scheduler chooses to. Again, it is entirely up to the WFL scheduler. If they say it's a forced win, it's a forced win. We go on, we move on, okay? If you fail to schedule constantly, we can provide punishments, including suspensions of players. I don't think we've ever done that, but it's there. So be aware that if you're somebody who doesn't post a lot or doesn't like to post on Discord a lot as far as scheduling goes, you might not be in WFL long because you'll be just removed for lack of scheduling. And if we get all the games in, or if there's a lack of scheduling on games by that 36-hour mark, we can and will advance early. We've advanced as early as 36 hours before. We've advanced at 48 hours. Typically, we're right around the 72-hour mark just because, like I said before, we all have lives and obligations. So there is that issue, but be aware that that's there, that 72-hour mark. And we usually post it in Discord every week. We announce when the deadline is for scheduling and when the deadline is to play your games. And we're usually pretty good about hitting those marks more often than not. We're pretty consistent about hitting, at worst, the 72-hour mark. Disconnects. No more than 5 attempts at a game ever. At that point, basically, it's either an EA server issue or one of the parties involved has a connection issue that just needs to not be worried about, and we'll just call it a straight sim. Some leagues accept partial results from games. Personally, I'm not one of those guys, but I don't want to say that that's a non-issue or that's a non-thing that happens in WFL. So we've got this clause in the rules that if both parties agree to use partial results from a game and they contact a member of leadership, preferably the scheduler, which you can tag in the thread, then a partial result can be accepted. So like say you get to halftime, one guy's up 14-0 and the game disconnects. You can choose to play another half with that 14-0 result locked in, and then add the result of the second game, the second half, to the first half that didn't save, and then get a total score, and then we can simulate the result of who won the game. Be aware there are issues with this, though, especially when you get into the second half of games. Sometimes when you quit out, Madden will force a result for the team that didn't quit. They'll force a result. So be aware that there are issues even with this that are outside our control. So that's another reason why we typically don't like partial results, is because sometimes there are things outside our control. We had it happen last cycle where guys did a half like I just described. Get to the half, they disconnect. They played a second half. They added up the scores. Team A won, but when they quit out improperly, and Team B ended up getting credited for the win, even though Team B didn't deserve the win because they didn't win. So be aware, and that's something we can't control. We can't go in there and manipulate wins and losses, guys. We don't have that kind of power. EA has not figured out how to give us that power yet. So when you do these partial results, be aware that if something happens with the game glitching, there's nothing we can do about it. So that's why it's kind of one of those things that I'd rather you just play the whole game over again and just deal with the time sink. But we do have that clause in there to allow you to decide on partial results. If you quit a game for any non-emergency reason, I realize it doesn't say that in the rules, but we've had instances where guys have had a family emergency come up during the middle of the game, and they inform their opponent, which is the way we've done it. So that's kind of our precedent, where they inform their opponent, hey, something has come up and I have to get out of here now. If you quit in that fashion with proper communication, it's not automatic removal. But if you quit a game under any other circumstances other than a disconnect internet issue, it's automatic removal. We do not tolerate sore losing. We do not tolerate it at all. If you can't deal with losses in this league, then you need to find a new league to be in. If you are playing the CPU, whether it's CPU team or it's a CPU user we've put on autopilot, when you go into play, if you choose to play the game, you must play the full game, or you can choose the play the moments option. You can never, in any circumstances, once you've chosen play full game or play the moments, you cannot then jump out and then jump back in. So play the moments is kind of our happy medium where you can jump in and out as plays dictate or as drives dictate. But when you're playing the full game, you're not allowed to just jump in there, play on offense, for example, and then jump out for defense and super sim defense. That's not allowed. Generally speaking, it creates flawed statistics, which is the reason we don't allow it. But play the moments is kind of my absolute maximum as far as negotiating on this. So you can either play the full game or you can play the moments, but you cannot at any point jump out and super sim any sort of ball game unless you're doing play the moments, which super sims anything unless it asks you to directly participate, in which case you can choose to participate or not, and if you don't participate, it keeps super simming. That's the only option where you can do super sim. You cannot go into play full game and then jump out and do super sim with play full game on. You either play the full game or you don't. You either play the moments or you don't. That's your options. When you play a CPU game, and this is one that I usually get the most flack on because guys will gripe about this rule the most of any of the rules we have. When you play the CPU, generally it's one shot. If you have an internet issue, if you have any sort of thing on your end where you disconnect during the game, that's it. You don't get another shot. And the reason for that is real simple. It prevents guys from start to lose, and then quit out to try again. Okay, that's the reason we do one attempt only. Okay, and if you're not one of those guys, then I'm sorry I'm punishing you. But that's the reason we do it, is because guys, we feel like a CPU game is like should be an automatic W. And that's not the way it should be. That's not the way it should be. It should be a challenging game. It should be a strategic game. But it shouldn't be an automatic W. And guys tend to feel that way about computer games, or CPU games in particular. So you get one shot. You cannot quit out. You cannot restart. If you get disconnected or if you choose to leave, then that's on you. If you choose to leave, in quotes, don't ever say you chose to leave. That's quitting a game. However, you also must follow all WFL rules while you play the game. So any rules on gameplay for offense, any rules on gameplay for defense, any rules on gameplay for special teams, you have to follow all the rules. The CPU doesn't, because I cannot make the CPU follow the rules. So I'm going to come back on camera for this one, because this is the one that I get the most grief for. Is why do I have to play by the rules if the CPU doesn't? Because that makes it more challenging. It makes it more challenging. All Pro, for a few of us, can be a cakewalk against the CPU. For a few of us, for most of us, other than the elite ones in here, and you guys know who I'm talking about when I say elite users, elite stick skills, most of us that have below average to average stick skills, the CPU can be challenging, especially if we have to follow all the rules. And yes, the CPU doesn't have to follow all the rules. The CPU can call multiple audibles. The CPU can call multiple hot routes. The CPU can blitz as much as they want. They can call zone as much as they want. They don't have the restrictions we do. That's what makes it challenging for you. You have to follow the rules. You can't stat pad. You can't run up the score. You can't run more than 2 hot routes a play. You can't run hot routes more than 25% of your plays. You can't run concepts more than 25% of your plays. You have to follow the rules to make it challenging. That's why it's there. That's why it's there. So those of you that gripe about or have a bone to pick about, gripe is a little bit strong. You have a bone to pick about having to follow the rules in a CPU game, that's why. It's to make it more challenging for you, so that way it's a challenging game overall. Okay? And I have punished people for breaking the rules against CPU games, because my feeling on it is real simple. In most cases, we have a full 32 user league. If the user were playing that game, would you break the rules against the user? Hopefully not. So why are you breaking the rules against the CPU team? Just because they're breaking rules? Just because your opponent's breaking rules doesn't mean that gives you the right to break rules. That's not how this works. That's not how any society works. Okay? If you are assaulted and you assault someone back, you're both under arrest for assault. Sorry. Just because you're getting the crap beat out of you doesn't mean you get to react back. Does it suck? Yeah, it sucks, but that's the way the world works. So in a CPU game, you have to follow the rules, even if your opponent's breaking all of them. In this case, your opponent being a CPU. Okay? Because in a user game, you could report this guy. You could say, "Hey, he's breaking the rules. I don't like it. So report him, and we'll get this person out of the league." Okay? But the CPU we can't get rid of. We can't get rid of the CPU, and I can't make the CPU play by our rules. So those are the rules in place, and that's why. It's to make it a more challenging game for you and to keep you on your toes for any sort of opponent you deal with. That's bare bones basic what it is. Okay? So if you don't like that, you can DM me, and I will listen, and I will respectfully disagree with you. So back to this. That was the last thing on this. The other things are obviously, as I talked about in the previous video and future videos, our sections on conduct, gameplay rules on offense, gameplay rules on defense, special teams, and GM rules. Links to all that's provided in every section of the rulebook. So if you need to pop to other sections to refresh yourself or just learn how we operate, there they are. And with that, our video rulebook section 2 is now to close. You can catch section 1, section 3.1, section 3.2, and section 4 down in the description below. There'll also be a link to join our league Discord if you happen upon this across the internet and you want to take a look and see how our league works and operates from the Discord standpoint. Feel free to use that link to join our Discord. You will have to go through an application process. Once you do the application process, you will be either provided a team if we have one open, or you'll be put on the waiting list, but you'll still get to hang out and chat and kind of become a member of our community. We appreciate you whether you came across this video across the internet or you're choosing to come here from the WFL. We appreciate any and all views of our content. I am Winuvas, one of our leadership team here in WFL, And this has been section 2 of our video rulebook. Thanks. Have a good one.